Hey, good evening and welcome to this edition of Thrive. I certainly hope it finds you well. And as always, know that I'm really grateful for your taking the time to allow me to encourage you and to help you thrive in the midst of wherever you find yourself. You know, I know many of you watching understand your life in terms of a call or a vocation. And for many of you, you understand that in terms of serving other people, of helping other people, of doing for them what they can't do for themselves so that they can become more that they are. And I think that is a commendable way to understand yourself in terms of life. It's a great purpose to have, and I certainly celebrate it. But I think if we're not careful, there's also a bit of a downside to that if we're not careful. I think if we're not careful, what can happen is because of that focus to make a difference, to invest ourselves in others, that it's very easy for us to end up living our lives for what I call the front row. By that I mean we all have people in our lives that we respect. People whose opinion we value, people whose feedback is really important to us. These are people of influence in our lives, whether they be friends or colleagues or anybody else. And you've got them and I've got them. For you, it may be people in your office, or it could be somebody in your life who, for example, when you're preparing a presentation, you can hear their voice in your mind guiding you, and you can imagine them saying what you're going to be talking about, and it influences and shapes the way that you are going to do whatever it is you're going to do. In my context, my front row is literally a front row in church on Sunday mornings. It comprises of people who are close to me, people who are important to me, people who are on the same wavelength, but nevertheless people whose values and whose feedback I really appreciate. And I think it's important that we all have these people in our lives. We all need people in our lives like this. We need people who are going to cheer us on, people who are going to pick us up and say you're doing well and give us the encouragement that we need. But if we're not careful, it can actually tip over into an unhealthy dynamic. Because when we live for that front row, when we focus on that front row, it can become a little bit unhealthy because it can have an undue influence on the way in which we see ourselves in some negative ways. For example, I remember a couple of years ago, a young woman in church was leading worship, and she just finished this really incredible bracket of worship where we'd really engaged with the presence of God and become aware of some things around who God is and just what He wants to do in our lives. She'd prayed and she had just brought us into a really precious moment. And because I'm in her front row, she looked across at me. Her face was beaming. And yet the look on my face didn't affirm her. I saw her shoulders drop. I saw the glint go out of her eye. And yet this is a woman who's got an incredible heart, and she's got a servant heart. And as I say, she'd done this incredible job. And nothing that came from me was a reflection of what she'd done. And yet because of the conversations I'd had that morning, and because of conversations I knew I was going to have after the service and later that day, there were so many things swirling around in my own mind that when she glanced across at me for affirmation, she didn't get it. She saw a reflection of everything else that was going around in my life at that point in time. And it had such a negative effect on her. And I say that because you've probably experienced something like that yourself. And it just highlights why I think that it's good to have our front row, but not to focus on it and derive our sense of well-being from it, and to be very careful about the feedback and all those things that come back to us from it. Because if we're not careful, we can get lulled into the sense of, well, if they say it's okay, I'm doing okay. Whereas often what comes back is just that they're telling us what they think we want to hear. It's almost like an echo chamber. They're on our wavelength and they're cheering us on, and it's what our friends do. And so when it doesn't come back in the way that we expect, it can become a negative thing for us. And often, as I say, it's not a reflection on us, it's a reflection on them. And so I've learnt over the years not to focus on the front row, not because Not because they come back with unhelpful things like that, but because what it does is it actually robs me of the ability to live out of my vocation. It stops me from engaging with the people who I need to engage with. It stops me from being aware of other people, because I'm focused on the front row and what they think of me, and do they like it, do they not, what are they going to say, and all those sorts of things. You see, what I've learned over the years is the wisdom in terms of something Jesus said in the Beatitudes, and how to live out of that on a daily basis, in terms of how I see other people and myself, not just in terms of tasks. Jesus talks in the Beatitudes about how we need to take our focus off what I call the front row and put it on the back row. He said, don't do things for people who can repay you. Don't do things for people who are going to reflect back to you the niceties that you expect. Don't serve people. Don't focus on people who are like you. Instead, he says, serve people and give to people, and make a priority of people who can do nothing for you in return. Because when you're doing that, then you're really living out of the true understanding of vocation and call in the way that we want to. And so what I've learned is to focus when I'm speaking, when I'm preparing, when I'm engaging, to not focus on the front row, but what I call the back row. It helps me in my preparation in terms of when I'm preparing to speak wherever it is. I think of the people, what are they going through, and what are they wrestling with, and how can I build them up? How can I connect with them? How can I encourage them? How can I pray with them? How can I make a difference in their life? For no other reason than I want to make a difference in their life for Jesus' sake. And what I've found over the years is that it changes so much in our life. It changes the dynamics more than we recognize, because instead of focusing on the feedback from the front row, and am I getting thumbs up, am I getting the little you're doing well signs and everything else, I'm focusing on the people who are wrestling with real life, who are not there to encourage me and cheer me on. Instead, they're there because they're looking to me to help them and to reflect Jesus to them in some way. And you experience that in your everyday life as well. People who need you to be as Jesus, who need you to be there for them instead of them being there for you, like the front row is. And when you take your eyes off the front row and start living for the back row, what it does is you begin to notice people, and you begin to engage in different ways, and you begin to see. You begin to see people and their situations, and you can begin to hear things on their voice because you're listening, and it just changes the way that you engage, and you begin to live out of your sense of vocation or call. And what happens is, at that point, you begin to make a difference. You begin to connect in deeper, more meaningful ways, because it's no longer about what's coming back. It's about what is coming from you. And when you learn to do that, it changes you. It allows you to be present in the moment for people, and it allows you to rise above those unexpected and unanticipated looks from your front row that are no reflection of you or your performance or your heart or anything like that. That they allow you to move beyond those things. And so I just want to encourage you with that thought. Don't live for the front row, live for the back. Don't derive your sense of well-being. Don't derive your sense of achievement. Don't derive your sense of having done well and everything else, and your validation from the front row. Get it from the back. Get it from having served out of everything you can, out of having invested everything you can in the people whose lives you're called to make a difference in, whether that be at work, whether that be at home, whether that be in some other volunteer context, wherever. Because at that point, you're actually living out of the fullness of Jesus. You're living out of the heart of what we call the gospel. And when we do that, it makes a difference, not just in their life, but in our life as well. So that's my word and encouragement for you. God bless you. I look forward to catching you next time.